Hey guys, welcome back. And this week we're going to take a look at a couple of Super NES games that started off really strong with their first outing and then just kind of tumbled down a staircase with their sequels. Usually sequels in video games build on the strengths of the original, with a much better game all around the second time around. But these two, well, you'll see. So let's get this one started with one of my all-time favorite games on the Super NES and its sequel that couldn't even come close to living up to the original. Zombies Ate My Neighbors for the Super NES is a game that I'm going to keep featuring in these videos until everyone has played this game. Yes, I know, Zombies has been on this channel before, but I promise it fits with the theme in this video. And if anything, it gives me a chance to go over this game in a little bit more detail than I did last time. So yeah, Zombies Ate My Neighbors is all about zombies eating your neighbors. It's a heck of a concept, I know, but trust me, it works. You basically pick from Zeke and or Julie at the beginning of the game, and then it's up to you to scour each maze-like level, rescuing your poor, hapless neighbors from the endless barrage of monsters that are trying to eat them. To accomplish your goal, you're given a variety of weird weapons to combat the armies of monsters suddenly attacking your neighborhood. But they all kind of make sense if you know how to use them or just watch a lot of old monster movies like I did, like throwing table silverware at werewolves, or even tossing ice cream bars at blobs to freeze them. You also get other usable items like boxing dummies to confuse enemies with, and even a potion that turns you into a monster so that you can give a few receipts of your own with your giant monster fists. It's a lot of fun to experiment with all this stuff, but there can be a problem with too much of a good thing, since you'll start to build up a collection of this stuff within a few levels. And the only way that you can select each thing is by slowly cycling through each one by one. And if you pass the item that you want, then you gotta go through every single one of them before it shows up again. It's a bit of an annoyance, but you kinda learn to live with it. Combine all of that with the hectic pace of the game, and even some two-player co-op action if you got a friend around, and Zombies Ate My Neighbors quickly turns into one of those just one more level kind of games. One big thing about this game that I really haven't talked about before is its presentation. Now, I've mentioned pixel art before in these videos, mainly because I'm a big fan of the artwork in this era of video games, and Zombies here is my all-time favorite example of that. I don't think I've ever seen any pixel art in a video game this good that doesn't come from Nintendo. It's so good that you can even study this if you want to. I know because I have. It's just that good. And of course, I can't mention this game without mentioning the music. And obviously that's a bit more subjective than the art, but man, a lot of these tracks just live rent-free in my head to this day. I mean, just listen to a couple of these tracks and tell me what you think in the comments. Now, I think everyone has one of those games that they can just pull out and play when they just want to forget about things. And Zombies is that game for me. I don't know how many times I've just felt bad about stuff and then loaded this game up to take my mind off of it. And you know what? It works just about every time. And that's why Zombies Ate My Neighbors is special to me, at least. And that's why it deserved a much better sequel than what it eventually got. Ghoul Patrol for the Super NES is, man, this is just a really bad sequel. Now, if you can't tell, I really like Zombies Ate My Neighbors a lot, so I was kind of curious when its sequel just kind of showed up on store shelves with barely a preview in magazines that I saw anyway. And looking on the back of the box, it only confirmed my fears, since this looked more like a cheap knockoff that you get at the dollar store than a sequel to one of the best Super NES games ever made. So yeah, if you thought Zombies Ate My Neighbors looked like it was just too much fun and you wanted a worse version of that in just about every single way, then Ghoul Patrol is definitely gonna be your jam. But was it really that bad? Well, I mean, kinda, because even at the basics, Ghoul Patrol just isn't that fun, thanks to some really strange gameplay decisions, the level design being the big one. Now, the original game, for the most part, featured levels that were kinda wide open with how you wanted to tackle them. I mean, nothing really forced you in a certain direction unless there were just some neighbors behind a locked door somewhere. Ghoul Patrol just decided to toss that idea right out the window and instead turned the levels into these weird, kind of puzzle-based mazes, where you're forced to constantly find keys to open doors, sometimes literally unlocking a door just to find a key to unlock the door that's in that room. It kind of almost feels like these levels are auto-generated at times. Oh, and just finding the neighbors this time around is annoying since they're constantly yelling at you in the general direction that they're in. And it feels like you're just wandering endlessly trying to find the right door with enough keys down the right hallway to find one random person. It's just so tedious. Also, everything just feels really cramped since the vast majority of the game takes place in these tiny hallways and rooms. Oh, and another thing that's super weird that they changed. Remember how in the first game when you save the last neighbor, the exit door just kind of opens right around you? Well, toss that convenience out the door too, since you now have to find the exit door after you've already wandered the whole level finding the neighbors. And honestly, it sometimes takes longer to find the exit than it does to find all of the neighbors. Just why would they do this? Even the enemies and weapons are just nowhere near as fun here. Gone are all the fun throwbacks to classic monster movies, and everything's just been replaced with generic stuff like ghosts and floating eyeballs. Oh, and don't even get me started on the music. I mean, it's like someone's trying their best to emulate the music in the original, and it just kind of all makes you have anxiety instead. Here, listen for yourself for a second. Everything in Ghoul Patrol just seems so generic. I keep saying that word, but that's all I can think of for this thing. Even if it wasn't being compared to the original Zombies Ate My Neighbors, this would still just barely be average. So I'm just not gonna really talk about this game anymore, simply because it kinda makes me angry. And I don't really do these videos to get angry. I've got enough things that make me angry, trust me. But I always try to give these games their flowers, even if they're not that great. And I always try to mention positives. Heck, I'm about to do that for the sequel to the next game that's in this video. But Ghoul Patrol is such a disappointment that it's hard for me to find much positive about it. It's like the developers took everything amazing about the first game, the graphics, the music, the gameplay, and said, what if we just make all of this worse? And that's what we get here, a not great game on its own and an absolutely terrible sequel. So do yourself a favor and stay far away from this one, and maybe just play a good game like Zombies Ate My Neighbors instead. Actraiser for the Super NES is one of the very first Super NES games that I ever played for the console, and it actually ended up being one of my favorites. This was one of those games that a family member just kinda had laying around and never really seemed to play too much, and one day I just decided to pick it up and try it out. Honestly, I didn't really know what to expect from the back of the box, since some of it looked like your typical action platformer, while other stuff looked more like a weird city builder, kinda like Sim City. Turns out I was right on both counts, since Actraiser very much starts out like an action game. These action stages are honestly the most average thing in the game. I mean, they're not bad, but they're just very basic in an early Super NES kind of way. They do look really nice though, and it helps that each one is accompanied by some of the best music on the Super NES. But once you beat a stage, that's where the game completely changes course. And now has you rebuilding towns that have been ravaged by the monsters that you just got done hacking up. And as much as I figured that I would not enjoy this part of the game at all, these little city building sections ended up being my favorite thing in the game. Yes, the game does slow to a crawl when you're rebuilding, but the whole customization aspect of this really hooked me. It also helps that this is a very simple city builder, and you can just jump in and start creating stuff without too much instruction at all. I loved making each town my own, and it kept me invested in the idea that I was actually helping these people. In fact, the more you rebuild, the more you can see these little townsfolk coming out and doing things for themselves. With the goal being to get the town powerful enough so that they'll open up the way for you to jump back into another action stage. So you can finally defeat the boss that's been responsible for afflicting the people, and then allowing you to move on to the next town. It's a fun flow to the game, and each area really mixes up both the action stages and the towns with the obstacles that are on each part of the map. Actraiser became an instant classic for me. I ended up renting this one and beating it multiple times because the whole city building aspect of it was just so much fun. Every new playthrough felt like a different game because of that, and I think a lot of people that played the original Actraiser agreed. In fact, it seems like the only people that didn't want that in the game are the people that would end up making its sequel. Actraiser 2 for the Super NES decided that us kids just didn't need all that boring city building stuff. Yes, much to my dismay, the sequel has done away with the strategy parts of the game and has instead promised non-stop action right on the front of the box. And sure enough, we're left with a sequel that's decided to beef up the part of the original game that felt like a generic NES action game, while leaving the one unique thing that the game had going for it on the cutting room floor. Upon first glance though, Actraiser 2 looks like it's gonna be more of the same. You're still playing as an all-powerful god, floating around the map in your cool cloud city, choosing a level, and then jumping down to hack up some demons. And to its credit, Actraiser 2 didn't just give those action stages a new coat of paint and call it a day. But man, what a new coat of paint this is. For as much as I don't care for this game as a sequel, I cannot deny just how good it looks. This is one area that is massively improved over the original. It's no doubt one of the best looking games on the Super NES, and if you're just going by that, then Actraiser 2 makes an incredible first impression. But the rest of the game has also undergone a complete transformation with how you play it. The kind of generic fun of the original is now replaced with this super heavy feeling gameplay as you slowly move around the stage. Even your new beefy character looks like he's being weighed down with his slow trudging animations. The game makes up for this by introducing an entirely new subset of movement using your wings to augment your slow walking. And they really went hard on this, since there's like a different action associated with every single direction that you press when you use them. The instruction manual almost looks like you're trying to do some sort of advanced fighting game moves rather than just moving your character around a stage. And sure enough, this is really frustrating until you master it, as you'll constantly find yourself pressing the wrong button combo and then just careening straight into an enemy or floating into a pit. And trust me, you have to master it, since not only did Actraiser 2 buff the action up, but it blasted the difficulty into the stratosphere, making this one of the hardest games on the Super NES in the process. Now, believe it or not, I did beat this as a kid, but I will be damned if I know how I managed it, because even now, in my advanced adult age, I can't get very far. And really that comes down to just not having the patience to learn all 19 wing movements in every situation while also attempting not to die every few hits. I should also mention that you do get a full set of magic this time around that gives you some much needed projectile attacks, since your basic sword attack just takes way too long to kill a lot of the most basic enemies in the game. The magic system is also dependent on which direction you press when activating, just like your wings. Like if you press up, you shoot a couple of energy balls into the air. But if you press down, then you make a temporary shield around yourself. It's actually really useful and pretty powerful. Unfortunately, the MP needed to use these spells doesn't come around too often, so you really need to use them when you need them, which is mostly at the bosses. What this comes down to is a game that feels like it just wasn't made for the people that liked the original Actraiser. Actraiser was never a difficult game that focused on advanced character movement and magic use. It was a fun, basic little action game that leaned on its city building to keep you playing. Actraiser 2 just feels completely misplaced in an effort to appeal to a broader audience that probably didn't give a crap about the first game. I'm sure there's some people out there that really like this one, but as a fan of the first game, it just really missed the mark for me. But if you want the hardest action game you've ever played wrapped in an absolutely gorgeous wrapper, then I guess give it a shot. It just wasn't the game that a lot of people wanted as the sequel to Actraiser. And I think that's going to do it for this week. Well, what do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree with these two? Now, I do know a lot of people that really like Actraiser 2, and I think you could make a really decent argument that that one's actually a good sequel. But I really don't see too many people coming to the defense of Ghoul Patrol. Heck, I'm pretty sure a lot of you watching didn't even know that it was a sequel to Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think either way, because I love to hear what your different perspectives are on this stuff. Oh, and don't forget to do that whole like and sub thing if you like the video. But that's gonna do it for me this week, kids. So check back next week for a bunch more video games to talk about, and until then, thanks for watching.